I had an interesting life experience, um, moving from research and writing and teaching about Native Americans into becoming involved in modern tribal affairs. And that transit from classroom to courtroom to council meetings began in the 1970s, particularly in 1973, when I went to Washington, D.C. with the small tribes of Western Washington to meet with members of Congress on behalf of terminated and non-federally recognized tribes in Oregon and Washington. Subsequent to the work in Washington, D.C. that started in 1973, I began working relationships with an interesting set of tribal leaders. And I want to mention just a few of those. Began initially with the Kuslo, Umpqua, and Siuslaw tribes on the coast of southwestern Oregon. And interestingly, my connection there was having grown up in Coos Bay. I lived a quarter mile from the tribal reservation and tribal hall. And I remember earning my first merit badge as a Boy Scout, I was working actually on public speaking and Indian lore. And the lecture that I gave to the Coos Bay North Bend Rotary Club when I was 13 years old was our local Indians, namely the Coos Indian tribe. Subsequently, I would represent that tribe as an expert witness in federal court. I would testify on their behalf before members of Congress. And my working relationships there were particularly with William P. Brainard, longtime tribal chair, and interestingly, one of my mother's former grade school students in the 1930s. Bill and I became close friends, and we had a very good working relationship for several decades. In the late 1970s, I began work for the Chinook, Wahkiakum, and Cowlitz tribes as their expert witness in federal court. And I soon got to know two tribal chairs very well, Donald Mechals of the Chinook tribe and John Barnett, longtime chair of the Cowlitz tribe. We had many meetings, lots of phone calls, many exchanges of letters, and ultimately, with the advent of email, electronic communications, these men were dedicated to trying to make conditions better for their tribes, which until the early 21st century were not federally recognized. They were Indian. They had allotments on the Quinault Reservation. Their estates were probated by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but the federal government refused to deal with them as members of a tribe. It was a really incongruous situation. So I went to work for Chairman Mechals, Chairman Barnett, and eventually for Chairman Cecile Maxwell of the Duwamish tribe to research and write petitions for federal acknowledgement to clarify their status and relationship with the government of the United States. Those projects for Chinook and Cowlitz involved more than 20 years of work, and for Duwamish, 8 years. Other connections that evolved over time included a friendship and working relationship with Helen Sanders. Helen, at age 95 or 96 in the year 2023, is a remarkable figure in Native American affairs. She was an original allottee on the Quinault Reservation when she was a child. She's one of the last survivors of the original allotment holders. She eventually became a timber company owner in spite of the opposition of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. She used her own skills and prowess to start logging her own allotments. Eventually, she was the largest individual landowner of timberlands on the Quinault Reservation. When I got to know Helen, she was the National Secretary of the National Congress of the American Indian. She served on the Cobell Commission on the adjudication of obligations of the federal government to tribes, financial obligations. Helen has just been a remarkable person. She visited my classes at Lewis and Clark College many times over the years and helped expedite the teaching of the Indian Law Seminar field-based program that attorney Dennis Whittlesey and I taught through Lewis and Clark's law school for quite a number of years. Helen would meet us at Chehalis. She traveled with us to Quinault. She helped expedite not only our connections with tribes, but the discussion of allotments, trust responsibility, reforestation, and treaty rights. Part of that circle also involved Katherine Jones Harrison, who died in 2023 at the age of 99. I got to know Katherine in the 1970s and work on restoration of Oregon tribes. She eventually became the longtime chair of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I also worked with the attorney, Rob Greene, for the Grand Ronde tribe, and particularly with David Harrelson, director of the Chalu Museum and head of their cultural resources programs. David, interestingly, was a history major at Lewis and Clark College, and it has been my thrill to watch him develop a staff for cultural resources, archaeology, history, and really be a leader in the modern Grand Ronde tribe. Another remarkable connection was forged in the early 1980s with Susan Crispin Shaffer, who was for nearly 30 years chair of the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua tribe in southwestern Oregon. Sue was a can-do person. She persuaded me to spend a lot of times on projects that I didn't think I had time to do. And this involved working on the tribal land claims case as expert witness, serving on the Umpqua Indian Development Corporation board, co-authoring the business plan for the Seven Feathers Casino, and helping in just numerous ways the tribe in its efforts to document its enrollment and to secure federal trust reservation lands. The Carver tribe in Northern California also became a very important commitment of time and energy. I worked particularly with the chair, Alvis Johnson, in matters that related to litigation and the U.S. Court of Claims over their tribal interest in the Hoopa Valley Indian Reservation. I was involved with the Karuk in the matter of Ruffy's Rancheria and the efforts of the congressman to restore a tribe that did not exist in Northern California and to document that matter, and particularly to clarify for the Karuk tribe the matter of the Carcieri decision, which meant that a tribe had to document that it was, quote, under federal jurisdiction in 1934. And I handily carried out that mission for the Karuks and worked particularly with Alvis and the members of the tribal council. More recently, I've been working with Dino Beltran, who is the recently retired chair of the Khoi Nation Band of Pomo of the Russian River Valley in Northern California. Also, among long-term working relationships, not only with the late John Barnett of the Cowlitz tribe, but his son, David Barnett, who was chair, William Iyall, who served as chair, and Patty Kinswa-Gazier, the current chair. As a result of these many involvements over nearly 50 years or more than 50 years, there's been an interesting payback, and it came in a wonderful way. The Quinault allottees for the work that Dennis and I did on their behalf over the years funded for $125,000 the Helen Sanders Scholarship at Lewis and Clark College and the undergraduate college, and the D. Terry Losh Scholarship at the law school for $100,000. That meant $225,000 in endowment funds. The Cow Creek Band of Umpqua, in appreciation for the work of Stephen and Dennis, gave $150,000 for a scholarship endowment to the Lewis and Clark Law School for its Indian law program. And in 2024, the Cowlitz tribe sent a check to Lewis and Clark College for $100,000 to add to the Stephen Beckham scholarship endowment. So it's been a real thrill and satisfaction to see this wonderful tribute in terms of assistance for the education for succeeding generations of students as a byproduct or consequence of 50 years of work on behalf of modern tribal people.